In a vast expanse of space, Commander Honor Harrington finds herself and her ship, the light cruiser Fearless, exiled to the remote and seemingly insignificant Basilisk Station. This assignment, a punishment from a superior who despised her, places Honor in a precarious position. Her crew, demoralized and resentful, blames her for their humiliating posting. Yet, as tensions rise and hidden threats emerge, Honor must prove her mettle, investigating political intrigue and military challenges to safeguard the station and her crew. On Basilisk Station is a science fiction novel by American writer David Weber, first published in 1993. It is the first book of the Honor Harrington series. The Honor Harrington series consists of 21 main books. The series also includes several anthologies and subseries such as the World of Honor anthologies. In addition to David Weber's contribution, there are collaborative works and stories by other authors set in the Honorverse. The book On Basilisk Station is a thrilling blend of military science fiction and space opera, featuring a strong, resourceful protagonist and intricate world building. If you enjoy stories with strategic battles, complex characters, and high-stakes scenarios, On Basilisk Station is a must-read for any science fiction reader. So now that we know the very basics of the story, let's see what the deep dive crew has to say about On Basilisk Station. Buckle up.
Okay, so are you ready to jump into David Weber's Honorverse with us?
Always up for a good space opera.
Right, so we're doing a deep dive today on Basilisk Station.
The one that started it all.
Exactly. 14 books, well, at least at last count. Can seem a little daunting.
It's a pretty massive universe.
Yeah, and the way Weber just throws you into this world, this future, with this crazy blend of like hardcore military strategy, political intrigue, all set against this incredibly detailed future. Like, even just getting started, I was impressed.
It's one of the things I really appreciate about his writing. Honestly, he doesn't dumb anything down. Like most military sci-fi, you can kind of skate on the surface and enjoy it.
Oh, totally. But here, it's different.
He writes like he trusts his readers to keep up. And I think that's a big part of why this universe feels so real, so lived in. Like the technology, the politics, the social customs, it's all connected.
You literally just said the thing that I stumbled over right away.
Oh yeah, what's that?
The scale. I'm talking about interstellar empires here.
Spanning multiple star systems. Yeah, it's a lot.
Right. Like, at first, it was just impossible to wrap my head around how big that actually is.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, to think about the distance between planets in our solar system, it's mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
But then magnify that by thousands, millions of times.
Right.
Just the thought of traveling between stars.
It's hard to even fathom.
Yeah. And honestly, it wasn't until I figured out their whole faster than light travel thing, specifically these things called wormhole junctions and Warshawski sails, that it clicked for me.
It's not as simple as beam me up, Scotty, is it? Which I think is another great thing about how Weber handles FTL. He establishes these really specific rules and limitations right from the get-go.
Yeah, it's not just hand-waving and technobabble.
Exactly. Like, remember those danger zones he describes around the wormhole termini?
Oh, man. So intense. So basically, picture like this cone-shaped area around each wormhole entrance, and if a ship tries to enter hyperspace, which is their version of FTL within that zone,
Catastrophic.
ripped apart by gravitational forces. Brutal.
It really highlights how, even with incredibly advanced tech, space travel is not without its risks.
For sure. And then there's this whole concept of how their ships use these things called Warshawski sails to ride these grav waves.
It's such a cool concept, though.
Oh, totally. But the first time I read it, my mental image was kind of terrifying. I'm picturing like these big, beautiful starships just getting tossed around like rafts in a hurricane.
I mean, I can see that. It makes you appreciate just how vital that inertial compensator technology must be, right?
Okay, that's a good point. Because otherwise everyone inside would be, well, paced.
Not a pleasant way to travel.
Not at all. But even with that, ships are still limited by how much they can carry through a wormhole at once, right?
Absolutely. There are these tonnage limitations on what can pass through at any given time.
Right. Which leads us to why Basilisk Station, this seemingly unimportant assignment that Honor gets, turns out to be crazy strategically important.
It's the ultimate choke point.
Okay, but why though? I can already hear our listeners who are new to the series thinking, why would a single station matter that much, especially with FTL travel?
Because it's all about controlling the flow of, well, everything, resources, military might, you name it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Whoever controls Basilisk Station basically controls who and what can go through that wormhole junction.
Oh, I see. So even if a hostile force wanted to, say, invade, they couldn't just send their entire fleet through at once, right?
Exactly, they're bottlenecked. Makes it a lot harder to launch a large-scale attack or even just reinforce their position quickly.
So you've got this strategically vital choke point, but it's also described as kind of a backwater.
Yeah, definitely not where you want to be stationed if you're an ambitious officer in the Royal Manticore Navy.
Right. It's like, I kept thinking back to when Honor first arrives at Basilisk Station. You get this sense that it's a dumping ground.
For the Navy's, shall we say, less stellar officer.
Exactly.
Which makes the fact that she's given command of a ship called Fearless, when it's in such rough shape, even more ironic.
Talk about a statement. And Honor, I mean, she's brilliant, but she's stuck in this dead-end assignment, saddled with a ship that's seen better centuries.
I think anyone listening who's ever been underestimated or overlooked in their own career can relate to that, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And then you add in the whole Manticoran political system that Weber lays out.
Which is fascinating in its own right.
Right. It's this weird mix of tradition and ambition, like this clash between old money and new ideas. You almost don't see it coming.
No, you really don't. Because on the surface, you've got this constitutional monarchy, you know, with the crown, parliament sharing power. But then you dig a little deeper and
there's more.
Always. You've got the aristocracy, those families that can trace their lineage all the way back to Manticore's original colonists.
Okay, so even though everyone's supposed to be equal,
in theory, sure, but those old family names, they still carry a lot of weight.
like an unspoken social hierarchy.
Exactly. And that's something that Honor, who's all about merit and hard work, constantly finds herself bumping up against. You can see it especially in her interactions with someone like Klaus
Hauptmann, the guy who runs that massive trading cartel, with more money than some star systems, right?
You got it. And he embodies this other key point about power in the Honorverse. You don't necessarily need a fancy title or a family tree that goes back generations. Sometimes economic power, like Hauptmann's, it translates into political power. Even the crown has to listen.
It's like real life, but with starships.
Right. And then on top of all that, you've got this whole other layer of complexity with the Medusans.
This pre-industrial civilization that Manticore is supposed to be protecting, but right away you get this feeling something's not right.
It's like this underlying tension. You've got things like the rising drug use among the Medusans, and the Native Protection Agency, which is supposed to be looking out for them, is chronically underfunded. They're in over their heads.
So it almost feels deliberate, like somebody wants to make the situation worse.
And that's where the ambiguity of this whole protectorate status comes into play. Manticore, they're obligated to protect the Medusans, but their control is limited, which creates this gray area that a rival power, someone like Haven, with their own interests in the region,
They might want to take advantage.
Exactly.
Haven always feels like that empire lurking in the background, just waiting for Manticore to slip up,
I always got that vibe.
which I guess, keeps everyone on their toes.
Sure.
So we've got to talk about Honor's leadership style, because it's not your typical inspire the troops with rousing speeches kind of thing.
Not at all. She's not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
She ruffles a lot of feathers, especially those who were used to the way things were before she showed up.
But here's the thing I found so interesting. She wins over her crew, not by being chummy or compromising, but by being so good at her job that they can't deny it.
It's that classic actions speak louder than words approach to leadership. And it's so effective, particularly in an environment like Basilisk Station, where mediocrity had become the norm.
Right. It was almost expected.
And suddenly, here comes Honor, and her success isn't just a personal victory, it throws a wrench in everything.
And-
It exposes how bad things have gotten, and that makes certain people uncomfortable.
Especially those higher-ups, who probably benefited from the way things were.
You got it. Suddenly, their little system's being challenged, which I love. And you know what else I love about the way Weber writes? The way he uses those supporting characters to really highlight those themes of duty and competence. Like, you've got Sergeant Major Jenkins, this rock-solid, dependable senior NCO, always there to provide that voice of reason.
He's the best. Don't forget Alistair McKeon, the executive officer, by the book to a T.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But he proves his loyalty time and again.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about great characters in this book without talking about Dominica Santos.
What a fantastic example of how Weber writes such well-rounded female characters, honestly.
Right. She's brilliant. She knows it. And she doesn't let anyone forget it, which I love.
Especially in her interactions with Honor, which makes their whole dynamic that much more fun.
Totally. Okay, and of course, we can't forget young Ensign Tremaine. I almost see him as representing that potential that Honor sees, not just in her crew, but in the Navy as a whole. He starts out green as can be,
Eager to prove himself.
totally,
Yeah.
and ends up playing this really vital role.
And you're right. It's through those individual arcs, those individual stories, that we start to see the bigger picture of what Honor's trying to achieve. She's not just rebuilding a ship, she's rebuilding a culture.
And then everything just explodes. What starts as this seemingly routine patrol turns into this wild ride.
Weber's really good at that, though. That slow build of tension.
Oh, the best. Like, you know something big is coming, but you have no idea what.
And just when you think you've got it figured out, he throws another curveball. It's like he's toying with you, but in a good way. So we've got intercepted contraband, rumors of some kind of mysterious power source, a full-on attack on the Native Protection Agency, and then that freighter arrives, the Sirius. And I gotta be honest, even on a reread, I still catch myself thinking, oh, it's just a freighter, what could go wrong?
You know, it's brilliant how Weber sets you up that way, lulls you into this false sense of security. And
Then everything changes. Because that's the thing about Captain Coghlan of the Sirius. He is not your typical freighter captain.
that's putting it mildly. And his plan, I mean, to instigate an entire interstellar conflict, insane.
Absolutely bonkers, but also kind of genius.
It's like he's playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers. But even knowing that, knowing it's all part of Coghlan's plan, when that final confrontation between Fearless and the Sirius kicks off, I'm on the edge of my seat.
It's classic Weber. He just sucks you in.
Totally. But it's more than that, right? Because you've got this old, outgunned warship going up against, well, a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Pivoting Goliath in space.
Yeah.
And just when you think you know how it's going to end.
Honor makes that call, fires the grav lance.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see that coming the first time you read it?
I did not. It was incredible. Like, you spend the whole book getting to know Honor, her sense of duty, her strategic brilliance, but that moment.
Talk about a game changer.
It's a defining moment, not just for her character, but for, like, the entire story going forward. Because up until that point, even with her successes at Basilisk Station, there's this lingering question. Is she too rigid to by the book?
Especially since, you know, Basilisk Station was considered a backwater.
Exactly. No one expected her to make waves, but suddenly Honor's out there rewriting the rules of engagement. And in doing so, she throws a wrench into everything. She exposes Haven's treachery. She saves the system from a devastating war, a war that would have benefited no one, by the way.
Especially not the Medusans.
Exactly. But in the process, she forces those back in Manticore, you know, those comfortable, powerful people, to acknowledge what she's accomplished. And let's be honest, she exposes their own complacency in letting things get so bad at Basilisk in the first place.
So massive win for Honor.
Right.
But I imagine there are repercussions.
Oh, absolutely. Because remember, all those powerful people who benefited from the status quo, the ones who liked the way things were before Honor showed up.
They're not just going to forget this.
Nope. But she does get recognized for her accomplishments.
She gets promoted, right?
Oh, yeah. She's given command of her own heavy cruiser,
What does she call it?
the HMS Fearless.
No way. Seriously.
Serious.
That's amazing. Talk about full circle moment.
Right. And I think that speaks volumes about how much her actions have shifted perceptions within the Royal Manticore Navy. They can't deny her skill anymore.
So what you're saying is stay tuned, because this is just the beginning for Honor Harrington,
Oh, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
which is what makes diving into a series like this so much fun. It's like setting out on a voyage of discovery, and you have no idea where you're going to end up.
And isn't that the best kind of story?
It really is. For anyone just starting out in the Honorverse, what's one thing, one idea to kind of keep in mind as they go forward?
Pay attention to the details, because everything matters in this universe. Weber's not just telling a story, he's building a world with its own history, its own rules, its own consequences. Honor's victory at Basilisk Station, that's a major turning point, but it's only the beginning.
And that's where we leave it today. But before we go, one last thought for our listeners. How do you think Honor's actions will shape the future? Will her victory lead to lasting peace, or will it just escalate the conflict with Haven?
Let us know your thoughts.
Because we love hearing from you. Until next time.